over functioning doesn't just take away from us, it takes away from the other person's growth, robbing them of the opportunity to grow into the full capacity of who they are.
Hey everyone, welcome back to True Northing. Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Feels a little weird to be saying that. I'm hoping everybody had a nice end of the year and transition into the newness of 2026. We have been talking a lot about the high capacity and low capacity man. And I loved the tie-in that Allie, you brought to the end of last episode, kind of reflecting on the core insights or themes from the year. So you touched on self-abandoning, over-functioning, and people-pleasing as three ways somebody can show up in a relationship, or three ways that somebody adapts. And when we think about being in relationship with somebody who has low capacity, it seems like the person who has adapted to be really good at self-abandoning or over-functioning would be a really good match for a low capacity person, that somehow those two people would find each other and be drawn to each other. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Those two are generally the ones that pair up. One that does too much and does more for the other person, and the one that has a hard time showing up and giving. And in some ways, it can feel balanced for each one of the individuals in the relationship because it reflects a sort of normalcy that they've had in their life, but it's very unsustainable and imbalanced. And the one who is over functioning, maybe, as I said, it can feel normal. But what happens is they end up burning out, they end up resentful, they end up just working so hard to have their needs met, but then not having their needs met and having to come to that awareness and conclusion on their own. So, yeah, in a big picture, those two are the pair. And they both kind of feed each other too, more and more. The more that one is over functioning, the more that the other can lean less into doing and more into being taken care of.
So let's define it a little bit. Let's say the woman who has learned to self abandon or overfunction in a relationship. So we can think about that as an adaptive or kind of natural way to develop given the circumstances that she grew up in.
Yeah, essentially, the woman in this case who has learned to self abandon learned that because she was never met where she was. She was never attuned to. And so she learned that she had to reach outside herself to connect with others, to be seen by others. Essentially, she had to probably leave her world to go meet somebody in their world, probably her parents when she was very small. It wasn't safe to be in her world, and maybe not safe, but maybe just it was very lonely. There was nobody there to meet her. And so if I want to connect, I'm going to have to leave behind who I am, my needs, my world, and go join in somebody else's world. And that creates the breeding grounds for both self-abandonment and overfunctioning and people pleasing.
That makes a lot of sense. And so with the over we're kind of using these terms interchangeably. I think there's a lot of overlap there. But when we think about the woman who over functions in the relationship, this is a really tricky piece to identify. I think you even said in the last episode, there are really sneaky ways that this over functioning can show up because a lot of the time it on the surface maybe looks healthy or responsible. It could be somebody who appears very compromising and considerate in the relationship and very self reflective, somebody that really takes accountability for their part of the relationship. They tend to look at themselves first and kind of evaluate, okay, what is my part? What is my work? What do I need? How can I shift? Um, which on the surface sounds very, conscious and empowered, right? That's a really important piece of being in relationship is being able to self-reflect and look at what your part is. And so maybe you can speak to that and that kind of slippery slope from healthy to unhealthy.
Mhm. Well, I know for myself, when I've thought about overfunctioning in the past, I always considered practical tasks, like somebody who just was a workaholic, or they made too many plans, or they had like too many, whatever they say, pans on the fire. But what I've become really awake to is that overfunctioning shows up in very subtle ways that, as you mentioned, can appear conscious, aware, healthy, but somebody can develop a survival response to be in relationship that they end up doing more self-reflection or inner work or um, like compromising than they should, that it's actually at the expense of their own well-being. And so that's the line that we're talking about, is when that awareness then becomes self-depreciating, where that they become over understanding of someone else, that everything must be something that they can do better about themselves. And so it's very healthy to be self reflective. It's very healthy to be understanding of someone else. But if there's only one person in the relationship doing the mental and emotional work and doing it for the other person, that's overfunctioning. And that is coming outside of yourself, because the understanding and the self awareness is taking the place of care from the other person. You're filling the gap of the space where the other person can't meet you by making it all about your understanding for why they can't meet you.
Right. So I can't expect them to show up in this way or participate in shifting whatever the thing is that maybe isn't working so well for me. And so instead, in order to stay connected, I'm going to really focus on my part of this and kind of dampen what I'm needing,
Mhm.
minimize my desires, and just work harder to keep the connection.
That, and also say the over functioning person is in therapy or they do all this self work, and that extends into doing the work for the other person. So instead of just looking at myself and maybe my family history or reasons why I'm showing up the way that I am or have the needs that I do, whatever it is, then I'm starting to look at the other person and I'm starting to make excuses for them. of like, oh, well, they can't meet me because this happened in their childhood, or this is what they struggle with. And that other person doesn't even have that awareness for themselves. And so while that can look healthy from the outside, what happens with that is that the woman in this case will go without her needs being met. She'll go without being seen for what she's struggling with because she is overcompensating by doing the work for both people.
That seems like a really important piece. Doing the work for both people,
Mhm.
bringing the awareness that the other person isn't bringing, doing the mental work, really giving, I think about mental energy, just expending all the mental energy that the other person isn't willing to bring.
And it can also show up in over explaining. So the person who's over functioning, they've done the research, they've come to all the understandings. They're aware and self-aware of what's happening, but then they have to do the mental and emotional labor of explaining to the other person what's going on. And often not explaining one time, often explaining over and over and over again to try to get the other person to have some level of meeting them and connecting to what's happening. But the overfunctioning person is somehow feeding that void within themselves through going past their line of what's theirs and what's somebody else's. And they're going into the other person's world where the other person should really be showing up to meet them, but they're going past the line of meeting to connect with the other person.
So the other person, the low capacity person, I guess we should say, isn't showing up saying, "Hey, I've reflected. Here's what I think is going on for me. Here's this piece about myself that I'm curious about or that I'm noticing is getting activated or whatever." They're not bringing that awareness forward. And so the over functioning partner is doing that work for them, is doing all that mental labor of, okay, what is their childhood wounding and how are they coping? And this might be because of that. And this makes sense because of this. And they're never going to be able to show up for me or meet this need of mine because of that, because of what they've been through. And so I'm just going to be very understanding and kind of maybe talk myself out of what I'm needing in
Yeah,
this relationship.
exactly that. Talk themselves out of needing it. And the understanding replaces a true need. And so you know that it's over functioning when you're not being met. And inherently, these are all good things to be aware of yourself, to be aware of others, to have compassion, to have empathy. But if you're not being met and you're doing all these things and somebody else, the person you're in a relationship, is not doing their work to also be self aware, and you're doing all of it, that's over functioning. That's feeding your part of the relationship with a low capacity person.
Yes. That piece about empathy, right? On the surface, empathy is good. Empathy is necessary in relationship. We are all wounded people. One wounded person coming forward and pairing up with another wounded person in our own ways. And so, yeah, it's not about kind of condemning the low capacity partner. We can be very understanding of what the situation is and where they come from and what their limitations are. But what you're speaking to is if the other person can't even hold that awareness for themselves or isn't interested in even acknowledging their parts and what they're bringing to the table and what their limitations are, then that's where it's unhealthy. That you can be empathetic and understanding and still never be met.
That's it. That's it. And this often comes in the form of making up excuses and over explaining and trying to get the other person to understand what you have spent days, months, years learning and coming to understand for yourself. So there becomes a really unhealthy loop there and a really unhealthy cycle.
And I wonder if the empathy tends to feel one way, one-sided. The overfunctioning person has all the understanding and the empathy for the other person and is trying to accommodate the low capacity person in an effort to be understanding and stay in connection, where the low capacity person tends to lack that empathy for the other person, for their needs. They're not saying, well, I mean, sometimes they might have that. Like sometimes they might be able to say, hey, I really hear that you need this and I totally get why you need this. That makes so much sense and you deserve that, and all of those things. But I think a lot of times the low capacity partner will respond defensively and invalidate the other person's needs as too much and unreasonable.
And the funny thing is, the low capacity partner could actually feel like they are offering a lot. Internally, offering anything feels like a lot. So they might not have self awareness that they're low capacity. They can feel like, oh, I have been understanding. But in the picture between the two people, there is a vast difference of the mental and emotional work that one of them is doing versus the other one. And both of them actually could not have the awareness of what's happening, but there's all this tension and it's really imbalanced. And one person is going to therapy every week and doing all the self help work and talking to people and looking at themselves, and the other person is not.
And I think that can often happen too, what you're talking to, going to therapy every week and doing all the self-help. That can happen or even kind of signal the person who's not getting their needs met in the relationship. And that becomes kind of the outlet of, okay, I'm just going to double down on my own inner work. I'm going to focus on healing myself and making myself better. And then maybe these needs will go away. Maybe I won't feel all this tension from not being met. Maybe it's all within me and I can control it and I can heal it. And then it won't be an issue anymore.
Exactly. So one person is showing up to do the work for both people in the relationship in effort to stay connected.
And he's like, look, I take the trash out on Tuesdays. I show up at 6 o'clock and I sit down at the table for dinner and I ask you how your day was. You are so ungrateful. What do you want from me?
Mm, yeah. Want you to be self aware. I want you to see what I'm carrying. I want you to care about what my needs are and go out of your way, as I do for you, to be attuned and to have forethought about care for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also want to touch on overfunctioning, how it shows up in other ways in life and in friendships and in other kinds of relationships as well. And first of all, I guess with overfunctioning, we've already talked about it, but the core of it is a feeling of unworthiness to be okay and have value just as you are. That you need to do something, know something, achieve something in order to be recognized, loved, cared for, and seen. And yes, it can show up in relationships in doing the overfunctioning of self reflection and self awareness and inner work. It can show up in always being the one to travel and meet a friend. You're the one who's always making the effort. It can show up financially in maybe paying for paying for things when you can't. Like doing that because, okay, well, I'm going to have to pay for lunch because if I don't, this person isn't going to want to go to lunch with me. Or I'm going to pay for the coffee, or I'm going to, um, I'm always going to be the one to, as I said, drive or travel to them because I don't believe that they want to meet me or see me. And so, all these ways that you come out of yourself and do more than what is healthy for you because there's an inherent belief or a discomfort with somebody meeting you. There's an inherent disbelief that somebody wants to make the same amount of effort to meet you and show up for you.
It's so helpful to hear it laid out like that, that underlying core belief that's driving the overfunctioning.
Mhm.
Yeah. Why would somebody just want to show up for me, to meet me? I don't know what that feels like. That's never happened before. I need to overextend myself to feel that connection.
If I let them pay for my lunch, they're never gonna wanna see me again. I mean, going to the deep beliefs, right?
Mhm.
If I express a need, maybe when we're at lunch, maybe I have to pay for the lunch because I don't believe that what I have to say is worthy enough for them to just have lunch with me. And so I need to like essentially pay for them to come and talk to me. It goes deep.
Right. And consciously we could hear this and be like, well, I know that's not, logical. Of course, they're my friend. Of course they want to be with me. But if you take pause and you really take a look and say, okay, what if I didn't pay? What if I let them pay for me? What would that feel like? I imagine the self abandoning or the over functioning person has a really difficult time, receiving care and love. Do you think that's true?
Oh, absolutely. That is it. They have there's a disbelief around receiving care because that was their imprint. Not that they weren't actually loved or cared for, they could have been loved and cared for, but for whatever reason, the imprint that they had in childhood gave them the message that they were not loved and valued and worthy just as they were and are. And so they have to come outside of themselves and do for others in all these specific ways in order to be loved and seen and met. There's not an inherent value.
Do you think the child who has the experience of, maybe on the surface, this looks like a very healthy, cohesive family, but the child just simply experiencing a lack of attunement, like for whatever reason, I feel like too much. My needs aren't being met. I'm not feeling really seen or heard or known. Like they get who I am, they love who I am, they're excited to see me, whatever it is that the child is needing. Just the experience of not having that connection when the child is just being themselves could cause them to interpret that as, okay, if I want to feel connection, I'm going to have to let go of this need I have to feel seen or heard or whatever it is. I'm going to have to kind of shake that off and ignore what feels like it's missing in order to reach out for the connection to meet them in their world where they are. That's where we get to connect, not when I'm in my world.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm having the remembrance right now of this study that was done on like top level CEOs having this sense of low self worth. And so this high achieving, high functioning these high functioning individuals correlating with low self-worth inside, and that being a motivator for them to do all they do and achieve all they do and be met and be seen and be recognized and be acknowledged and finally be worthy. And there's a spectrum here, right? Like the child who's mostly loved, mostly attuned to, mostly cared, has a good enough environment, they might feel some degree of, well, maybe in this circumstance, I need to step outside of myself a little bit. And maybe some of that is healthy to a degree. I don't know. To meet somebody and step into their world. Of course, that's a healthy thing to learn. Like it's not all about our world all the time. And on the other side of the spectrum, somebody who was never seen and maybe shamed for who they are and were and told they were unworthy and all these different things really have to reach outside of who they are to be seen and loved and met. And so, what I've come to understand about overfunctioning is that it's not just about all the practical workaholic planning events, things on the outside, but all the ways that it shows up on the inside in relationships, in every relationship, and really how we can just be attuned to the markers within ourselves of when that overfunctioning light is coming on. And so, yeah, pay for your friend's lunch. Like, that's a great thing. And maybe do a check in if you're somebody who tends towards overfunctioning, that check in. Oh, am I doing this because I'm feeling low self worth right now and I'm scared to receive? Or I'm scared, maybe I feel too vulnerable receiving. Maybe it's scary to be in a vulnerable position of somebody else having the authority or the choice. And so doing that simple check-in, where am I at right now? Am I making this choice because I'm afraid and I feel vulnerable and I feel unloved, or because I am in my self-worth and I'm just meeting this moment right here, right now?
Seems like a really good marker to notice how that feels, to allow yourself to receive care, to maybe feel really comfortable buying lunch for your friend, but then as soon as your friend wants to reciprocate, noticing that discomfort in yourself, maybe that's a really uncomfortable thing to have somebody else pay for you or do something nice for you because of this kind of, if you really look deeply, this maybe deep fear that you are burdening them in some way, that they don't actually want to do something nice for you. Why would somebody want to do that?
Yeah, maybe they don't even wanna be at lunch with you. Maybe they're doing it out of obligation,
Right.
or
Right.
maybe they don't actually wanna be there. All these little things and stories that we can come up with that are replaying from a wound that happened.
I love the idea of having this be a practice with a friend. Maybe you notice you are the friend who always pays, not always, but likes to. Feels like it feels good to you. It brings you something to be able to pay for everyone, which I know personally I enjoy that. That's something that's true for me. But this is really making me think about this more deeply, because to receive the same, to have that reciprocated, can be uncomfortable for me. And so if you can identify that as maybe a signal that you are somebody who over functions, you tend to overfunction. And maybe it's just in your romantic relationship that you do all this mental work and over functioning, but you've gotten so accustomed to that bleeds into your other relationships or even at work, helping a coworker, but then not wanting to ask for help when you need it, something like that. So with a friend, the practice could be, well, one, hopefully you can just have these conversations about, you know, who you are and what you're learning about yourself. And just, hey, I've noticed that I get really uncomfortable when you or anyone in my life wants to do something nice for me. And I'm very comfortable doing nice things for other people. And so I'm really trying to work on receiving more, allowing myself to receive, to feel worthy of receiving. And so to help me with that, what if we rotate? What if we get into some kind of practice? Or maybe it's just a one-off, or maybe it's, you know, for the next 3 months or whatever. I don't know. Whatever your situation is, whatever makes sense. But I'm going to buy lunch today because I love doing that. That's very comfortable for me. And if you feel the impulse to buy lunch next time, I'm going to really work hard to just allow you to do that and not fight you on it.
Yeah, friendship is definitely a safe place to start. Um, and coming back to relationships a bit and friendships, it's not about when we're talking about overfunctioning and maybe healing that overfunctioning part of ourselves. It's not how do I care less or how do I not have empathy or how do I stop having so much self awareness. It's more about how do I learn to honor myself, honor my needs, and allow myself to tolerate the gap where somebody else is not showing up or can't show up instead of filling that gap. How can I learn to see it without overcompensating? Or and with that, how do I let somebody else rise? Because overfunctioning doesn't just take away from us, it takes away from the other person's growth. It's robbing them of the opportunity to grow into the full capacity of who they are. And so the more the overfunctioning person can tolerate their own vulnerability, their own feeling of discomfort, come to understand it, love it, be with it, care for it, learn all the ways to nurture it so that they don't step into a space that's not healthy for them and other people.
That makes so much sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't need to overcompensate or overdo. I'll go my half, right? I'll take care of me and what I need to do. And then I'm going to stop when it gets to your side. And I'm going to give the space for you to show up and fill that gap if you so choose. And if you don't, there will be a gap there, and just learning to tolerate that.
And see what arises within that void, within that gap. Do they rise? Do they develop more capacity? Do they step into a more full version of themselves? Or do you see what's there? See that your needs haven't been met. See that maybe they've never been met and digest that. So if you're noticing yourself over explaining, permitting neglect, tolerating excuses, even making the excuses for yourself, going for all these new accolades, anticipating needs, researching more, doing all these things to try to make yourself feel worthy and connected, I invite you to pause and reflect. Am I doing this because I'm deeply with myself and loving myself, or because I'm trying to get someone to meet me and see me and value me? Thank you so much for tuning in to True Northing. Please like and subscribe and share this message with anybody that you feel could benefit. And we look forward to connecting with you next week.
See you then.